The colony on Redhis 9 was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel louder. Kale walked along the metal walkways carrying a toolbox and humming softly. His job was simple: repair the colony's life support systems and make sure the habitat modules stayed intact. He liked his work because it was steady, predictable, and left him thinking in peace. That calm ended when he heard a soft squeaking coming from one of the storage tunnels. At first he thought it was a malfunctioning vent or a small colony rodent, but the sound was too alive, too urgent. Curiosity drew him closer. He found them in a corner of the tunnel, 3 tiny hatchlings huddled together. Their scales were soft, still translucent in places, and their eyes blinked slowly, unsure and frightened. One stretched a tiny wing trying to balance, while the others pressed closer, shivering. Kale froze for a moment. Dragons were rare on Redhis 9, almost mythical. Stories told of massive beasts, fire-breathing and proud, living only in distant galaxies. But these were small, helpless, and completely alone. He knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Hey there, you're okay," he said softly. The hatchlings twitched but did not run. They watched him with cautious eyes, tilting their heads in a way that seemed almost human. Kale glanced around. No adult dragons were in sight. He knew instinctively that these were orphans. Their father, the colony had whispered, was a powerful dragon lord, feared and respected, and had left to find a guardian capable of protecting them. For some reason, these tiny creatures had been left behind, alone in a cold, empty tunnel. He carefully opened his toolbox and took out a small heating pack. He placed it near the hatchlings, then stepped back. The smallest one crawled toward it, curling up to feel the warmth. Kale's heart thumped. He had never touched a dragon before, and yet, here he was, already feeling responsible for their survival. "You're safe, for now," he whispered. The next hours were a blur. Kale improvised feeding bottles from tubes and liquid nutrients the colony used for small animals. He held each hatchling gently, coaxing them to drink. They struggled at first, weak and trembling, but gradually they began to trust him. By nightfall, Kale had cleared a small section of the tunnel, laying blankets and padding so the hatchlings could rest. He stayed nearby, keeping an eye on them. Whenever one stirred, he offered comfort, a soft hand on a wing or a whispered word. They huddled close together, but each seemed aware of him now, as if sensing that he was their protector. Days passed in the same quiet rhythm. Kale learned their habits. One liked to explore tiny spaces, crawling along walls, testing its wings. Another was shy, always hiding under his hands or blankets, peeking with wide eyes. The third was bold, trying to climb onto his shoulders, experimenting with balance. Kale began naming them quietly so he could tell them apart. Mira for the bold one, Tilo for the shy one, and Koro for the curious one. Kale's routine became their routine. He repaired machines during the day and checked on the hatchlings often. He sang softly at night, just a simple tune, and they listened, calming themselves against the warmth of his hand. It was exhausting, but Kale felt a strange joy. These creatures depended on him completely, and he had no choice but to rise to the responsibility. One evening, as Kale adjusted the heat panels, he felt a presence outside the tunnel. He froze, heart racing. But it was just a small drone from the colony sent for maintenance checks. He exhaled and returned to the hatchlings. Mira stretched a tiny wing toward him. Koro crawled onto his lap, nuzzling his hand. Tilo blinked slowly, almost as if understanding that no danger was present. Kale realized then that trust was growing slowly but surely. They were learning that he was not a threat, and he was learning that dragons, even small ones, were intelligent, emotional, and observant. Each chirp, each movement, told him more than any human could understand from words alone. He thought of the father dragon out there somewhere, searching for a guardian. Kale wondered what the mighty dragon would think if he knew a human was keeping his hatchlings alive, teaching them, protecting them without weapons, without power, just care and patience. Would he laugh? Would he scold? Or would he see the truth, that guardianship was not about strength alone, but about presence, understanding, and trust? Night came and the station dimmed its lights. Kale sat beside the small group, watching the hatchlings sleep, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. The quiet tunnel felt warm, safe, and alive in a way it never had before. Kale whispered softly, more to himself than anyone else, "I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but you'll be safe. I promise." The hatchlings stirred slightly in response, curling closer to him. He smiled, a small, tired smile, feeling the weight of responsibility and the joy of being trusted in return. In that moment, the human mechanic and the orphan dragons became a single unit, protector and protected, teacher and learner, bound by care and courage. Outside, the stars shone silently, the colony resting, unaware that a small human had just begun raising dragons. And in that quiet, hidden corner, a story of trust, bravery, and new beginnings had already begun. The morning light filtered through the station's viewport, casting soft patterns on the floor. Kale stretched and yawned, glancing at the hatchlings. Mira, Tilo, and Koro were already awake, testing their tiny wings against the edges of their padded enclosure. Their scales had grown shinier, stronger, and the fire in their small eyes reflected growing confidence. Kale knelt down, holding a small tray of nutrient liquid. "Breakfast first, then lessons," he said, smiling. The hatchlings chirped eagerly, pressing close to drink. He guided their tiny heads, showing them how to lap the liquid without spilling. Mira was bold, drinking quickly and trying to climb onto his shoulder. Tilo hesitated, and Kale encouraged her gently, whispering, "You can do it. I'll help you." Koro, curious as ever, explored the tray with his snout before carefully drinking. Once they finished, Kale cleared the tunnel floor, removing boxes and loose equipment. Today would be their first real lesson in movement beyond crawling. "We're going to try walking, hopping, and flapping," he said softly. The hatchlings looked at him with a mixture of excitement and hesitation. Kale knew it was a big step. Learning to fly was not just about wings. It was balance, courage, and trust. Mira went first. She took a small leap onto a low platform Kale had set up. Her tiny claws scrambled against the surface, wings flapping awkwardly. Kale stayed close, holding a hand near her for guidance. "Good, Mira. Keep going," he encouraged. Mira chirped proudly and tried another jump, this time catching a small gust of airflow. She wobbled but landed safely. Kale's heart lifted. Next, Tilo climbed onto the same platform. She froze, looking down with wide eyes. Kale knelt beside her. "It's okay, Tilo. I'm right here. You don't have to rush." Slowly she stepped forward, then flapped her wings. They trembled, not enough to lift her fully but enough to keep her from falling. Kale smiled and clapped softly. "See? You're flying already in your own way." Tilo blinked as if understanding the praise and tried again. Koro was the boldest. He hopped from platform to platform without hesitation, flapping his wings wide. Kale held his hands ready just in case, but Koro landed perfectly, looking back at Kale with a proud chirp. "Good job, Koro." Kale cheered. The hatchlings chirped to each other, celebrating their small victories. As the day went on, Kale guided them through small exercises. He used crates and low beams to teach them how to balance, jump, and flap in rhythm. He noticed how they observed each other, learning quickly by imitation. Myra's daring moves inspired the others, and Tilo's careful steps reminded Kale of the importance of patience. He also taught them to land safely. "You don't just fly forward, you have to know where you will land," he explained, demonstrating with small controlled jumps. Koro tried and fell softly onto the padded floor. Kale picked him up and whispered, "It's okay. Try again." The hatchling chirped softly, nudging Kale's hand, and tried once more, landing this time without trouble. Kale realized the hatchlings were learning more than just movement. They were learning trust. Each leap, each flap depended on their confidence in him. And with every success the bond grew stronger. He felt proud but also humbled by the responsibility. These tiny dragons could become powerful one day, and their first lessons were under his care. As night approached, Kale watched the hatchlings curl up on the blankets. Mira rested her head on his lap, Tilo tucked close to the warmth of the heating pack, and Koro pressed against his arm. Their small bodies rose and fell with steady breaths, and Kale felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. They were safe, growing stronger, and beginning to understand the world around them. He thought of the father dragon, still searching for a guardian. Kale hoped the mighty dragon would understand that safety was not about power but guidance. These hatchlings were learning courage, balance, and trust, not from fear or force but from care and patience. In the early hours of the next day, Kale prepared a small obstacle course for the hatchlings, using crates, rails, and low beams. Mira led the way, hopping from one platform to another, flapping her wings with growing confidence. Tilo followed slowly, testing each movement carefully, while Koro explored every edge, experimenting with new ways to balance. Kale encouraged them at every step, praising their efforts and helping when they struggled. The hatchlings began to respond in unexpected ways. Mira would stop and chirp, waiting for Kale to watch as if seeking approval. Tilo began observing the others, copying their moves and slowly gaining her own confidence. Koro, ever curious, started nudging Kale's hands, seemingly asking for guidance on more daring maneuvers. Kale laughed softly. "You're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you," he said. The hatchlings chirped in response, wings stretching, tails curling around him. It was a strange, joyful harmony. By sunset, the hatchlings could jump higher, flap better, and move with growing coordination. Kale stepped back, hands on his knees, exhausted but satisfied. "Tomorrow we'll try something bigger," he whispered. The hatchlings blinked at him, eyes shining with anticipation, as if understanding that each day brought new lessons and adventures. Outside, the colony lights glimmered faintly, and somewhere far away, the father dragon continued his search for a guardian. He would not know yet that his children were learning to fly, growing strong, and learning trust under the care of a human. For Kale, the realization was simple but profound. Teaching the hatchlings to fly was not just about wings, it was about patience, understanding, and presence. And through these lessons, the bond between human and dragon grew stronger, a bond that would guide them through challenges yet to come. The hatchlings settled down for the night, tired but happy. Kale placed his hand gently over them, feeling their warmth and steady breathing. "You're ready for tomorrow?" he whispered. "And I'll be right here with you." The stars twinkled silently outside the station, and for the first time, Kale understood what it meant to guide life through trust and care, helping the small dragons take their first steps toward the sky. The morning started like any other. Kale was tidying the station, repairing a leaking coolant line, while Mira, Tilo, and Koro practiced hopping between low platforms. The hatchlings were growing bolder, their small wings flapping with increasing confidence. Kale smiled at their progress, unaware that danger was approaching from above. A sudden vibration shook the station. Alarms flashed red as Kale rushed to the viewport. In the distance, a small squadron of scavenger ships hovered, engines humming aggressively. Kale's stomach dropped. These ships were notorious for capturing rare creatures for profit, and his hatchlings were exactly what they were hunting. He quickly gathered the dragons, calling them close. Mira chirped nervously, Tilo huddled against him, and Koro nudged his hand as if sensing the threat. Kale's mind raced. He had no weapons, no reinforcements. All he had was the station, his wits, and the trust of the hatchlings. The scavenger ships scanned the area, sending small drones down to search the colony modules. Kale ducked the hatchlings under a reinforced maintenance platform. "Stay quiet," he whispered. They pressed close, trembling but trusting him. He knew the intruders would search every corner, so he had to think fast. Kale grabbed tools from his belt, spare panels, wires, and sensors. He moved quickly, creating small barriers and tripwires, improvising alarms to give the illusion of traps. The scavenger drones approached, lights piercing the dark corners. One scanned near the platform, detecting movement. Mira flapped her wings, startling the drone. Kale held her gently. "Shoo, not yet," he murmured, calming her. The drones moved systematically, unaware of the humans' clever tricks. Kale guided the hatchlings silently, crawling along air ducts and maintenance tunnels. Koro's small wings brushed against the walls, making soft sounds, but Kale's quick hand muffled them. The dragons followed instinctively, learning how to stay hidden. Outside, one scavenger pilot grew suspicious. "Something's here," the voice crackled over comms. Another drone hovered near the main corridor. Kale pressed against the wall, heart pounding, and whispered, "This way. Quick." The hatchlings obeyed, moving with him like a single coordinated unit. Kale realized he could use the station itself as a weapon without firing a single shot. Loose panels, small machinery, and lighting controls became distractions. He tripped lights to flicker and created sounds that made the drones hesitate. Mira flapped her wings suddenly at the right moment. Koro kicked a small crate, sending it clattering across the floor, and the scavenger drones paused, confused. The trio of hatchlings began to understand the rhythm of hiding and moving. Tilo peeked from behind a crate, then darted silently, following Kale's guidance. Mira made a small fluttering noise, drawing attention just long enough for Kale to pull them into a side corridor. Koro nudged a panel that fell softly, signaling a path. The human and dragons worked together, a silent, improvised team. Kale guided them to a reinforced storage compartment, the kind normally used for colony supplies. He quickly sealed the entrance, leaving just enough ventilation for air. The hatchlings pressed against him, eyes wide, but their trust was clear. They had followed his instructions without hesitation. From the viewport, Kale could see the scavenger drones searching every corridor. They scanned, paused, and then moved on. Kale held his breath. He whispered softly, "Just a little longer, they'll leave soon." Hours seemed to stretch as he stayed beside the hatchlings, ready to act at the first sign of detection. Finally, the scavenger ships, unable to locate anything, disengaged. Their engines roared as they moved back into orbit, scanning one last time before disappearing into the distance. The tension in the station lifted like a heavy fog. Kale exhaled deeply, kneeling beside the hatchlings. Mira chirped softly, Tilo blinked, and Koro nuzzled his hand. They had survived the first real threat together. Kale smiled, though his hand still trembled slightly. "You're safe, for now," he whispered. He realized something important. The hatchlings were learning more than just flying and balance. They were learning trust, quick thinking, and awareness. Every small movement, every quiet obeying of his guidance, reinforced the bond they shared. After the danger passed, Kale allowed the hatchlings to explore again, cautiously. Mira attempted a small flight from a platform to a crate, flapping wings with precision. Tilo followed slowly, testing her balance after the stress. Koro explored the storage corners, curiosity overcoming fear. Kale watched carefully, making sure they were confident but safe. He understood that survival wasn't just about hiding. It was about observation, quick thinking, and cooperation. The hatchlings had instincts, yes, but combined with guidance they could navigate danger in ways no one expected. Kale's mind wandered to their father, who would return soon. The mighty dragon would see that his children had not only survived but grown smarter under a human's care. By evening the station was quiet again. Kale cleaned up the improvised barriers and checked the hatchlings' health. They were tired, wings drooping slightly, but their eyes glimmered with pride. They had faced real danger and come through it together. Kale placed his hands gently on each, whispering, "You did well. I'm proud of you." The hatchlings chirped softly in response, curling up together on the padded floor. They had learned trust, courage, and patience. And Kale realized that in this galaxy strength did not always mean power. Sometimes it meant intelligence, quick thinking, and a willingness to care. Outside, the stars glittered silently. Somewhere far away, the dragon father continued his search for a guardian. But here, in this hidden station, Kale and the hatchlings had discovered something important. They could survive, thrive, and grow together, even in the face of danger. As night fell, Kale sat beside them, watching their small chests rise and fall. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we'll keep learning. And next time, nothing will surprise us." The hatchlings chirped softly, a promise of courage and trust that bound them all together. For Kale, the lesson was clear. Guardianship was not about force. It was about presence, guidance, and a bond strong enough to face anything, even the threat from the skies. The morning air felt heavier than usual. Kale was tending to the hatchlings, checking their wings and helping them practice small flights, when a low rumble shook the station. Mira stopped mid-flap, Tilo froze, and Koro's ears twitched. Kale looked up toward the viewport and his heart skipped a beat. Above the colony, a massive dragon descended from the clouds, scales shimmering in sunlight. The sheer size and power of the creature were breathtaking. Its wings created gusts that rattled the station panels. Kale realized immediately who it was. The father of the hatchlings returned from his long quest. The hatchlings chirped nervously, pressing close to Kale. Mira climbed onto his shoulder, Tilo leaned against his chest, and Koro nuzzled his arm. Kale knelt, spreading his hands to calm them. "It's okay," he whispered. "He's here but we're safe." The father landed gracefully outside the station, observing quietly. He had expected to find his children alone, perhaps frightened or disoriented. But through the viewport he saw them perched on Kale's hands and shoulders, alert, confident, and playful. Their eyes sparkled and their wings twitched with energy. Kale's first instinct was to step back, bowing slightly out of respect. Dragons were powerful and proud, and Kale knew his small human presence could be misinterpreted. I've been taking care of them," he said softly. "Feeding them, keeping them warm, helping them practice." He trailed off, unsure how much the father would understand. The dragon tilted his massive head, studying Kale carefully. For a moment, silence stretched across the station. Then he lowered himself slightly, wings folding, eyes narrowing, not in anger but in evaluation. Kale held his breath, aware that the entire outcome rested on this first impression. Slowly, the father stepped inside the station, careful not to startle the hatchlings. The babies chirped nervously but did not retreat. Kale noticed their confidence. They trusted him even in the presence of their own parent. That trust struck the father. He had come seeking a guardian, expecting someone stronger, perhaps more powerful, but here was a human whose patience, care, and presence had shaped his children's growth. The father spoke, his voice deep and resonant, filling the station. "You have cared for my hatchlings," he said, each word deliberate. "You have not commanded them but guided them. You have kept them alive and taught them courage." Kale swallowed. I just tried to do what was right, he replied. I didn't have their strength, but I tried to keep them safe. The hatchlings chirped, moving slightly closer to Kale as if reinforcing his words. The father's gaze softened and he lowered his massive head to Mira first, then Tilo, then Koro. He sniffed them gently, his wings folding more relaxed. It was clear that he recognized the bond between human and dragons. Kale realized the father wasn't here to judge but to observe. The mighty dragon had expected raw strength, skill, and command, but what he saw was something different: trust, patience, and mutual respect. He realized then that guardianship was not about force. It was about presence, consistency, and care. The father stepped back, eyes meeting Kale's. You have earned something rare, he said. Not because you are strong but because you are patient. You have taught them trust. That is harder than any battle I could face. Kale blinked, his chest tightening. He never thought of himself as special, just someone doing what was necessary. Yet, in the eyes of the father dragon, he had passed a test he did not know existed. Over the next hours, the father watched as Kale guided the hatchlings through exercises. Mira practiced hopping between platforms, Tilo tested her wings with growing confidence, and Koro explored every corner of the station. The father nodded subtly with each success, acknowledging Kale's teaching without interference. Kale noticed the father studying the hatchlings carefully. They're learning fast, Kale said quietly. And they trust me. They're happy. That's what matters, right? The father's massive head lowered closer. Happiness and trust are more important than strength alone. You have given them both. You have proven that protection is not only physical. You have guided them without fear, without force, and they respond because of it. That is rare, human. The hatchlings chirped, flapping their small wings. Mira hovered near Kale's shoulder, Tilo bounced gently on the platform, and Koro pressed against Kale's leg. Their movements were confident, yet full of trust in him. Kale realized then that the father had already accepted the bond he had formed with the hatchlings. By evening, the father had returned to a more relaxed stance, wings folded neatly, observing quietly. Kale sat on the floor watching the hatchlings curl around him. The father's eyes met Kale's once more, and in that silent exchange Kale understood something important. He was not just a caretaker. He had become part of the hatchling's life in a way that no test or trial could erase. Thank you, Kale whispered softly, though the dragon could understand more in a look than in words. The father gave a slow, approving nod. The hatchlings, tired from the day's lessons, nestled closer to Kale. The father stepped back, allowing the human and his children their space. He had found what he had been searching for, not a powerful warrior, not a strict teacher, but a guardian who earned trust and nurtured courage. As the stars appeared outside the viewport, Kale watched the father leave the station for the night, confident that his children were safe. The hatchlings chirped softly, wings brushing against him. He whispered, "We did it. We kept them safe. And we'll keep learning, together." In that quiet moment, Kale realized that strength was not always measured in power or size. Sometimes, it was measured in patience, in care, and in the bonds formed between beings, no matter how different. And under the watchful stars, a human and 3 small dragons had created a new definition of guardianship that would shape their future together. The morning sunlight spilled through the viewport, casting golden patterns across the station floor. Kale stretched and glanced at Mira, Tilo, and Koro, who were already awake, chirping softly and stretching their wings. The tiny dragons had grown noticeably in the weeks since their father's return, stronger and more confident than ever. Kale smiled, feeling the warmth of the bond they shared. Today was different. The father dragon had returned for a brief visit, observing quietly from the edge of the station. Kale could feel the weight of those watchful eyes, not as a threat but as recognition. The mighty dragon had seen how the hatchlings thrived under Kale's care, and now there was no need for fear or tension. The father understood that Kale's guidance had nurtured more than strength, it had nurtured trust. Kale gathered the hatchlings. "Come on, we have a big day ahead," he said softly. Mira flapped her wings eagerly, Tilo followed hesitantly but confidently, and Koro bounced in place, eager to explore. The hatchlings had learned to move as a team, responding to his subtle signals and guidance. Their tiny forms leapt from platform to platform, flapping and gliding with growing skill. The father dragon stepped closer, observing as Kale guided the hatchlings through an obstacle course he had prepared. The course was simple: small platforms, padded walls, and gentle slopes, but it required coordination, balance, and trust. Mira led the way, flapping confidently between platforms. Tilo followed carefully, watching both Kale and her siblings, and Koro explored every edge, testing what he had learned. Kale noticed the father leaning in slightly, eyes softening. They are learning not only to fly but to work together, Kale whispered almost to himself. And they trust me. They really trust me. The father's gaze met his, and Kale felt a silent understanding pass between them. It was more than acknowledgement, it was respect. The mighty dragon had sought a guardian capable of protecting his children. He had expected strength, skill, perhaps even dominance. Instead he found patience, empathy, and unwavering care. Kale had become part of the hatchlings' world, not by force but through trust. The hatchlings paused, looking at the human who had taught them so much. Mira chirped and flapped her wings toward Kale, almost as if showing him her progress. Tilo stepped closer, nudging his hand gently, while Koro balanced on his shoulder, peering at the father dragon with curiosity. Kale laughed softly. You're showing him what we've learned, aren't you? He said. The father nodded slowly. They are strong but their strength is in their bond, with you, he said. You have taught them courage and trust. That is rarer than any power I possess. Kale felt a warmth spread through his chest. He had never imagined being praised by a dragon, let alone the father of the hatchlings. But it wasn't just praise, it was validation of the bond that had formed over weeks of care, practice, and gentle guidance. As the day progressed, Kale allowed the hatchlings more freedom. They flapped between platforms, hovered briefly, and even attempted short flights under his watchful eye. Mira led daring leaps, Tilo calculated her movements carefully, and Koro explored every edge, testing limits. Kale stayed nearby, hands ready but not interfering, letting them gain confidence and independence. The father watched quietly, occasionally nodding, clearly pleased. Kale realized that the dragon's presence no longer brought tension. Instead, it was a shared understanding. The hatchlings were safe, growing, and thriving. The human had not only protected them but had prepared them for a future where strength and courage would be tested. By evening, the hatchlings curled around Kale, tired but happy. Mira rested her head on his lap, Tilo leaned against his chest, and Koro nuzzled his arm. The father stepped closer, lowering his head to touch Kale gently with his snout, a silent gesture of trust and acknowledgement. Kale's heart leapt. You have done more than I could ask, the father said softly. They are ready for the world not because of fear but because of guidance and care. You have given them something powerful, human. You have given them trust and love. Kale smiled, feeling the weight of his journey. I just wanted them to be safe, to grow strong, and happy, he said. I didn't expect anything else. The father gave a slow nod. And yet, that is exactly what they needed. You are part of their story now, part of their life. That bond, that is strength beyond measure. As the stars appeared outside the viewport, Kale looked at the hatchlings, their small forms rising and falling in peaceful sleep. He thought of the days spent teaching them to balance, flap, and explore, of nights spent keeping them warm and safe, and of the trust that had grown between them. He realized something important. Guardianship was not about power or dominance. It was about patience, understanding, and the quiet strength that came from being present. The hatchlings had chosen to trust him, and in doing so, they had created a bond that no challenge could break. The father dragon stepped back, wings folding neatly, leaving Kale with his charges. He had seen what he came to see. The hatchlings were ready, and the human who had guided them had earned his respect. Kale's role was not over, but it had been recognized. Kale whispered softly to the hatchlings, "We'll keep learning, keep growing, and face the world together." Mira chirped in response, flapping her wings once. Tilo nudged his hand gently, and Koro stretched across his shoulders. Outside, the galaxy shimmered, filled with stars and possibilities. And inside the quiet station, a human and 3 dragons had forged a new bond, one of trust, courage, and love. A bond that would carry them through adventures to come, teaching everyone who watched that true strength could be found in care, patience, and the unbreakable ties between different beings. Kale smiled, feeling a quiet pride. "We're ready for anything," he said softly. And in that moment, the human and the hatchlings, together with the father's silent blessing, became a family, united, strong, and bound by a new understanding of what it truly meant to protect and to love.